It was December 10th, 1941. 3 days earlier, the Americans had suffered a heavy blow at Pearl Harbor, and the Empire of Japan was now wiping out British and Dutch garrisons in the Pacific. The proud Royal Navy soon deployed Force Z, a small but formidable task force, to Singapore, reckoning it would be enough to deter Japanese aggressions along the Malayan coast. Prime Minister Winston Churchill was confident his superb HMS Repulse and HMS Prince of Wales battleships could overcome any obstacle the Japanese may erect on their paths. However, Force Z would face a much superior Japanese naval force that fateful morning. Tensions in the Pacific. After the end of World War I, the Empire of the Rising Sun expanded rapidly across Asia. With Korea under its control, Japan turned its attention to the crumbling Chinese regime and invaded Manchuria in 1931. When war broke out in Europe in 1939, the empire opted to continue expanding in Asia at the cost of British, Dutch, and American colonial possessions, namely Singapore and Malaya. Then, in the fall of 1941, the British government, led by seasoned war veteran Winston Churchill, sought to bolster its military presence in the region as a deterrent to Japanese aggression. Subsequently, 2 strategies were put on the table. The offensive strategy had the objective of defending British interests in China, while the defensive strategy aimed to protect communication lines in the Indian Ocean. As such, the Royal Navy chose Singapore as its main naval base in the region, a crucial spot in which the British could set up an appropriate defense or attack against the Japanese Imperial Navy. Over 90,000 men and 140 aircraft were always ready to fight the enemy in case of a surprise attack. Meanwhile, the United Kingdom kept fighting the Axis in the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, and the North Sea, and few warships were available to reinforce the garrison in the Pacific. As time would tell, the Royal Navy failed to consider the consequences of having most of its fleet fighting so far away. Force Z. As the Admiralty debated over what to do next, some believed the Japanese would not dare attack the United Kingdom and decided that sending just 4 older battleships would be more than enough to deter any attack. Others, such as Churchill, took the situation more seriously and opted to send a smaller but more prepared task force. As such, the Royal Navy began sending reinforcements to the Far East in 2 phases, and on December 2, 1941, the British dispatched Force Z to reinforce Singapore. The force comprised the battleship HMS Prince of Wales, battlecruiser HMS Repulse, and destroyers Electra, Express, Encounter, and Jupiter. HMS Prince of Wales, under the command of Admiral Sir Thomas S. Phillips, was one of the newest vessels in the Royal Navy, with Churchill adding that, quote, "A King George V class battleship exercises a vague general fear and menaces all points at once. It appears and disappears, causing immediate reactions and perturbations on the other side." Churchill had given orders that Prince of Wales could destroy any Japanese ship that dared open fire against her. But even though Force Z was small and powerful, it lacked a vital asset, an aircraft carrier. The task force was originally going to be joined by the carrier HMS Indomitable, but she was damaged and left behind for repairs. Soon, Force Z arrived in Singapore and received a warm welcome, but the fear of war still loomed on the horizon. Get on without it. Admiral Phillips visited Manila in early December to discuss the operation with his American counterparts. He then departed on December 7th, right before the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. War had officially begun in the Pacific, and Phillips braced for the inevitable. Sooner or later, the Japanese were coming for him. On December 8th, Phillips received reports of Japanese landings at Kota Bharu in Malaya and Singora in Thailand. The admiral decided it was time to get on the offensive and go after the Japanese before they disembarked more troops in Southeast Asia. Force Z then set sail toward the north to meet the enemy at Malaya's eastern coastline, where Admiral Phillips decided to sortie and engage the Japanese invasion fleet. Phillips knew that air support was essential for combat at sea, but he said to his men, quote, "We must get on without it." Rain and fog allowed Force Z to hide from enemy reconnaissance aircraft and submarines as it approached Malaya. Then, while at sea, Phillips received a message about Japanese landings at Kwantan. Upon his arrival, he noticed it was a false alarm. A lone submarine spotted Force Z and fired 5 torpedoes, completely missing. Unfortunately, Force Z had lost the element of surprise and was now compromised. Thanks to Providence. Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa, the commander of the Japanese invasion fleet, received 4 additional heavy cruisers, a light cruiser, and 4 destroyers to strengthen his already formidable force of 2 battleships, 7 heavy cruisers, 1 light cruiser, and 12 destroyers. It was now time to intercept Force Z and eliminate it. At daybreak on December 10th, the British task force was scouring Kwantan with no luck. But as Phillips deviated east to monitor suspicious activity, Japanese raiders found him first. At 11:07 a.m., Captain William G. Tennant from Repulse warned the crew, quote, "Enemy aircraft approaching. Action stations." As the signal replicated aboard the entire fleet, all ships sped up to 25 knots and opened fire. By the time the first wave of bombers swooped down from the southeast, the swift British vessels were displaying outstanding evasive maneuvers. From 12,000 feet, the swarm of Japanese aircraft managed to score 1 minor hit on Repulse, which remained in action. The bombers then gave the battered fleet a short respite, but immediately after they left, a second wave of torpedo aircraft arrived. The swarm split in 2 to chase after both major ships, and then launched their torpedoes from 400 feet. Calmly, Captain Tennant maneuvered his battlecruiser out of harm's way and informed his superior that, quote, "We have dodged 19 torpedoes so far, thanks to Providence." Even so, the flagship had been less lucky, and during a torpedo hit on her port side, Prince of Wales soon began flooding, and her speed relented to 15 knots, as she listed about 11 degrees to port. Wounded Pride. The power loss left Prince of Wales with almost no means of communication, either internal or external. Many of her turrets were frozen in place, and most of her anti-aircraft guns were ineffective. As pumps stopped working, Captain John C. Leach hoisted, quote, "Not under control." In less than half an hour, and with a single hit, the Japanese had irreversibly wrecked the pride of the British Navy. As there was no response from the flagship, Repulse approached Prince of Wales to offer assistance, but the Japanese suddenly struck from the east. The blemished ship endured another 3 hits on her starboard, while Repulse dexterously evaded attacks from all directions until her luck ran out. Hit amidships, Repulse was not able to avoid another wave of aircraft, and after taking 4 successive hits, Tennant and his crew abandoned the ship as she rolled over and sank 33 minutes past noon. Meanwhile, the flagship continued struggling, but the last Japanese bombing had scored 1 definitive hit, ending her hopes of survival. Many men were able to board express, and Prince of Wales finally sank at 1:20 p.m. No more than 85 Japanese aircraft had sunk 2 of Britain's capital ships in less than 3 hours, while only losing 3 warplanes. By the end of the battle, the Japanese aircraft had crushed the entirety of the British naval power in the Far East in a single stroke. End of an era. The loss of Force Z is considered by many historians to have had a more considerable impact than the attack on Pearl Harbor. It was the first time capital ships were sunk solely by aircraft in the open seas while conducting an active defense, and the effect on the morale of the British Empire in the Far East was crippling. The fact that large ships could be overtaken by small aircraft proved that battleships were vulnerable to minor disruptions. Both vessels were not only fast and robust warships, but markedly agile. Regardless, they fell victim to superior Japanese air power. Moreover, as many modern analysts ponder, it was not an isolated circumstance that settled the fate of Force Z that morning as much as the unforeseen impact of a sudden technological revolution. Admittedly, British officers were perhaps too cautious when employing surface ships during the daylight in the early years of the war. Besides, it would be fair to acknowledge an element of luck on the part of the Japanese, who would never be able to replicate such an attack with carrier-based aircraft. The fact that the Japanese took the British off guard also played a crucial role in the outcome, especially considering British heavy gunfire was more than effective, and Japanese vessels would not have resisted a frontal attack. Still, the Japanese long-lance torpedoes might have given them a crucial advantage. The events of December 10th, 1941 cemented the narrative for many months during the Pacific War. But above all, they marked the transition from the era of the battleship to that of the aircraft carrier. Thank you for watching our video. Please subscribe to Dark Seas and all of our Dark Documentaries channels for many more epic stories from modern history. Also, don't forget to hit the like button and activate the notifications bell to be the first to know about our newest content. Stay tuned.